It's 2024, and we think we know all about history and have outpaced all previous generations and nations in development. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if we've been kept in the dark longer than we can imagine? Today, I'm about to reveal some shocking discoveries that will change everything you think you know about human history. How one tomb's secrets brought loot, exploitation, and released a legendary curse. It was the 26th of November in 1922 when Howard Carter, a British archaeologist and Egyptologist, discovered something in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. What his team thought was a poorly decorated tomb at first turned out to be the resting place for Tutankhamun, or as some call him, King Tut, an ancient Egyptian pharaoh who died at a young age, likely from bone necrosis, scoliosis, and malaria. In his tomb, they found not only gold and ebony treasures still in place, but also a sealed doorway to the inner burial chamber, guarded by two life-size sculptures of Tutankhamun. At the time of discovery, it was pretty safe, and about 5,000 items, such as couches, chests, thrones, and shrines, were still in the tomb. Some of the items are now in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, but they weren't always. The tomb was desanctified, and many artifacts were removed from Egypt and sold to the highest bidder. But that's not all. Legend has it that a curse was placed upon those who dared disturb the pharaoh's sacred resting places. Not long after the tomb was opened, tragedy struck. Lord Carnarvon, who was backing Carter's excavation, passed away just 6 weeks later. Coincidence? In fact, several others involved in the excavation met untimely deaths, fueling the belief in the curse's influence. And of course, since the British government was footing the bill for the excavation, it laid claim to the loot, arguing it was a boon for the British people. Of course they did. How else would they make the British Museum? So what's the compromise? Well, after some diplomatic back and forth, they struck a deal. The treasures would stay put in Egypt, but displayed for the world. The earliest story told in pictures. The oldest known cave paintings were discovered in Sulawesi, Indonesia in 2019. It was a discovery led by archaeologists from Griffith University who teamed up with Indonesian rock art aficionado Adi Agus Octaviana and found out these paintings have been on those cave walls for anywhere between 35,100 and 43,900 years. They have a hunting scene straight out of the Stone Age, complete with part human, part animal figures going toe-to-toe with wild boars and other beasts. Now, why are these paintings such a big deal? Some reckon these paintings weren't just about aesthetics. They might have been a way for early humans to express themselves, tap into their spirituality, or even tell meaningful stories. Plus, this was the first ever form of visual communication from our ancestors. The ancient computer. In 1900, a strange object was found in a shipwreck off the coast of the island of Antikythera. This object, with bronze gears and dials, was believed to be an ancient Greek astronomical calculator. Fast forward to 1959, and Princeton historian Derek de Solla Price steps in and reveals that it was actually an ancient Greek analog computer. The Antikythera mechanism, as it's now known, wasn't just for telling time. Oh no, it was a full-on celestial calculator, predicting the movements of the sun, moon, and planets as well. That's not all. It even had calendars, eclipse predictions, and even a heads-up on when the next Olympic Games could take place. Who knew those ancient Greeks were such tech experts? The world's first seismoscope made in ancient times. Like everyone else in ancient times, the Zhou dynasty of China thought that seismic events were punishments sent by gods. But even in times and beliefs like this, Zhang Heng made a device he called Hufeng Di Dong Yi, which literally means an instrument to measure seasonal winds and Earth's movements. This is what we now call a seismoscope. He did that in 132 AD. That's right, even in old times like this. How? On the outside of the instrument were 8 dragon heads, each facing one of the 8 cardinal directions. Below each dragon, there was a toad, mouth wide open, ready to catch whatever came its way. When seismic activity struck, one of the dragon mouths would release a ball, which would then drop into the waiting toad's mouth below, and the direction from which the ball dropped showed the direction of the quake. After the Mongols swept through China, the seismoscope disappeared, lost to the sands of time. However, through a series of tests conducted between 2002 and 2007, Chinese scientists put forth a theory that seemed to fit the bill, and this ancient masterpiece was finally all figured out. How understanding Mayan language unleashed a wave of looting. The Spanish conquistadors had destroyed a lot about the Mayan civilization, even their writing system. It wasn't until the 20th century that scholars like Yuri Norosov and David Stewart cracked the code. After centuries, we could read 3/4 of the surviving Maya texts. But why is this so important? It was the only fully developed writing system native to the Americas, dating back to the 3rd century BCE, when it was first recorded in San Bartolo, Guatemala. But here's where things take a dark turn. With great knowledge comes great temptation, and looters couldn't resist getting their hands on a piece of the Mayan world, just like their ancestors. Places like the ancient city of Sultan became prime targets, and valuable stuff like stone figurines and jade jewelry disappeared faster than you could say archaeological treasure. And where do these stolen treasures end up? Well, let's just say they're not hanging out in your local thrift store. Nope, they're either sold on the sly to wealthy buyers or end up in fancy museums, far from their rightful home. A treasure worth trillions found through religious scrolls. Back in 1946-47, some young Bedouin shepherds were out and about, probably just tossing some rocks around as you do, when they accidentally stumbled upon a secret chamber hidden deep in a cave. What's inside? Only some ancient scrolls dating back to the time of Jesus. After nearly a decade, more than 900 manuscripts were found, and they became known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among them, there's this one standout, the Copper Scroll. Why is it so special, you ask? Well, for starters, it's not written on your usual parchment or papyrus. It's actually carved onto metal, copper mixed with tin, to be exact. But it's so brittle that they had to cut it into 23 pieces and then put it back together. The language and style of this copper scroll are unlike any other in the bunch. It's written in a form of Hebrew that's closer to everyday speech than the fancy literary stuff found in the other scrolls. And it's not some epic tale or philosophical musings like the rest. Nope, it's a straight-up list of directions to buried treasure. We're talking gold, silver, sacred vessels, the whole deal. Its value? Believed to be over $3 trillion in today's money. Despite all the hype and excitement, nobody's been able to find this treasure yet. Sure, there have been plenty of attempts, but the language in the scroll is so cryptic and the starting point so vague that it's remained hidden all these years. Ancient humans didn't just rely on meat. So, you know how we've always thought our ancient ancestors were all about meat? It turns out that we might need to rewrite that history book. In 2016, researchers discovered charred leftovers in a South African cave called Border Cave. This discovery revealed that humans were eating roasted root vegetables 170,000 years ago. These aren't just any veggies, mind you. We're talking about rhizomes from the genus Hypoxus. They were likely tasty, white-fleshed, and packed with all the good stuff our ancestors needed to survive year-round. What's believed to be a cemetery turns out to be the world's oldest temple complex. Back in the 1960s, Turkish and American anthropologists stumbled upon Gobekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, but they thought it was just a regular old medieval cemetery. It wasn't until the 1990s, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt rolled in and started searching around, that they found this place, which was about 9,500, 8,000 BCE old. Gobekli Tepe was around long before people started farming, and pyramids and even wheels were created. These massive circular structures are decorated with pillars shaped like giant T's that weigh up to 60 tons each and are intricately carved with all sorts of animals: foxes, lions, bulls, you name it. These carvings have predated writing for thousands of years as well. And the most interesting part? According to surveys, there could be as many as 200 obelisks and 15 more temples just waiting to be discovered. The largest Anglo-Saxon ship ever buried. In 1934, Edith Pretty decided to investigate the mysterious mounds on her property in Sutton Hoo, England, which she strongly believed were haunted. So she calls in Basil Brown, a self-taught archaeologist, to do the work. Inside the largest mound, he discovers a phantom ship outline marked by rust stains and nails. But there's no ship left, just its ghostly impression etched into the ground. But there were some other things. Treasures, if you'd call it. Over 260 items fit for a king, literally. We're talking weapons, shiny silver and gold cutlery and buckles, some fancy coins, and a one-of-a-kind full-face helmet. These treasures came from as far as the Middle East and the Byzantine Empire, which means the Anglo-Saxons' trade networks were no joke. Fun fact, before this discovery, historians often brushed off the years after the Romans said their goodbyes to Britain as the Dark Ages. The discovery that's still being kept a secret from you. In 1908, G.E. Kincaid noticed some odd markings on the canyon wall along the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon and decided to explore it. He named the cave Citadel. Lo and behold, he found a cave hiding some well-preserved mummies. These mummies were arranged on shelves, wrapped in cloth and bark, and even wearing some copper bling. Rumor has it that he stumbled upon some giant skeletons too, like 7 to 8 feet tall. Among the mummies and giant bones, they found seeds, copper tools, and even fancy gold cups. Fun fact, at the time they dated back to, humans weren't advanced enough to deal with copper. And he found hieroglyphic scribblings on the cave walls which were Egyptian. But here's where things take a dark turn. Just when Kincaid and his fellow Professor Jordan were getting into the thick of it, they vanished into thin air, leaving their crew conveniently claiming ignorance. The oldest library in the world. In the 7th century BCE, Ashurbanipal, the ruler of the Assyrian Empire, now northern Iraq, decided to flex his intellectual ability and established what we now call the Library of Ashurbanipal. This library was filled with clay tablets covered in cuneiform writing and over 30,000 tablets, making it the world's oldest organized library. Inside were all sorts of writings, religious texts, medical books, and more. Like most intellectuals, Ashurbanipal loved collecting old writings and sent people all over his empire to find and copy ancient texts. Sadly, this legendary library was destroyed in a fire when Nineveh fell in 612 BCE, and it was only found in the 1800s. After Austin Henry Layard and Hormuzd Rassam found it, they took the tablets to, take a guess where. Of course, it's not Iraq where they belong, but England, the British Museum to be precise. Where else could it be? Dog's tooth reveals earliest known travel in UK history. Archaeologists found a dog's tooth near Stonehenge. This was proof of the oldest road trip in Britain, a 250-mile journey from York to Wiltshire, taken 7,000 years ago by a hunter-gatherer and their dog. The enamel revealed that this canine was satisfying its thirst with water straight from York. They think the dog was kind of like an Alsatian, but with more of a wolfish vibe. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, for starters, it's the earliest evidence of a long-distance journey in Britain. And it's not just some random trip, it's to the spot called Blick Mead, in the middle of Stonehenge territory, which seems to have been a hotspot for nearly 4,000 years, drawing folks from all over. From 7,900 BC to 4,000 BC, people kept showing up and bringing their dogs, and there were massive feasts. The massacre that took place in the 5th century. On the island of Öland, off the coast of Sweden, is Sandby Borg ring fort. There, archaeologists found evidence of a brutal massacre dating back to the 5th century. The remains of at least 26 people, including men, women, and children, were found. Their remains had signs of violent deaths like blunt force trauma and even decapitation. The victims were found inside houses and strewn across the streets. What's particularly creepy is that the site seems to have been abandoned right after the massacre, with bodies left where they fell and houses sealed up. This left Sandby Borg frozen in time. Given the valuable treasures left behind, it's unlikely to have been a simple robbery. Multiple brooches of high-ranking individuals hint at a gathering of tribal leaders, which probably turned tragic. The Cave of Altamira. The 1800s, a time when humans still believed that the bigger skull you had, the more intelligent you were. In those times, a hunter found the Cave of Altamira in 1868. Marcelino Sanz de Sautuola, an archaeologist, studied it in 1880 and said it was ancient and belonged to the Paleolithic era. But experts, as they always do, didn't believe him. They said that these intricate paintings were nothing more than modern fakes. After all, how could our animal skin-wearing ancestors have created such masterpieces? That was until similar things were found in the 1900s, and Sautuola was long gone to the next world. Their studies now revealed that humans lived in the cave for a long time, from about 25,000 to 10,000 years ago. They found lots of stuff left behind, like animal bones, ash, flint tools, and coloring materials as well. The oldest language that was finally deciphered. It was the early 20th century when Arthur Evans dug up something extraordinary, a huge palace from around 1900 to 1450 BC. Big deal? Well, wait for it. But yes, this palace itself was massive, with over 1,300 rooms. What really caught people's attention were the beautiful frescoes painted on the walls. They showed dolphins, griffins, and even athletes doing daring bull-leaping stunts. And no, even that wasn't the big mysterious discovery. The discovery I'm talking about was the thousands of clay tablets that were carved with a strange language that no one had ever seen before, which Evans named Linear B. For decades, scholars scratched their heads over these mysterious writings. No one could understand what they meant. It wasn't until 50 years later, in the 1950s, that a brilliant mind named Michael Ventris cracked the code. The oldest city that traded pearls. Al Sinai Island in the Arabian Gulf has hidden something from hundreds of rulers for centuries. It was finally discovered in 2022, an ancient city dedicated to pearl fishing, dating back to the late 6th century AD. The best part? Apparently it's also the oldest known pearling town in the Gulf region. It was around 12 hectares. The houses were made from rocks found on the beach, and their roofs were made from palm tree trunks. They even found remains of pearling operations scattered all over the place here. It was filled with oyster waste, mined pearls, and relics like a 1,300-year-old bath, and even diving weights. And that's not all. Near that town's remains, there was another place hidden for centuries. an ancient Christian Al-Sinai monastery complex from the same pre-Islamic era. This means those living in the Pearling Town might have been Christians too. And radiocarbon dating and pottery digs revealed that this community existed from the late 6th to the mid-9th centuries AD. The oldest human footprints. Children's footprints were found on the edge of an ancient lake in North America, in White Sands National Park, New Mexico. They date back between 21,000 and 23,000 years. And what does all this mean? Well, it shakes up the whole story of how humans got to North America. See, before this, we thought humans crossed over from Asia around 14,000 years ago after the last ice age. But now, it's looking like they might have been in Alaska way earlier than that, and then slowly made their way down. The emperor who was buried with an army of guardians. There's rarely any burial site that has come close to the grandeur of the burials of the ancient Egyptians. But an emperor from China easily surpassed them, and that too 2,000 years ago, back in 210 BC. It was China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. He had opted for an entire army of clay soldiers to guard his tomb. And when we say army, we're talking about a solid 8,000 life-size soldiers, each with its unique hairstyle, posture, and facial expression. It would have been found a lot sooner, right? Well, no. In 1974, some farmers in a small village were just about to dig a well when they found the first hint of this discovery. After a full-blown excavation, we discovered what we now know as the Terracotta Warriors. They were buried in pits so deep you'd need a ladder just to reach the bottom, with the largest pit stretching out farther than 2 football fields laid end to end. When they were first excavated, they still had traces of their original paint from 2 millennia ago. But that's not all. Surrounding the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is a massive complex designed to imitate the grandeur of the Qin Empire. We're talking replicas of palaces, scenic towers, and even imitations of rivers and seas, all made with mercury to give them that authentic shimmer. The French cave that is more mystical than it is historical. In southwest France, inside Bruniquel Cave, there are some mysterious structures. Walls made from stacks of stalagmites. Yeah, those pointy rock formations. But here's the thing. These constructions weren't the handiwork of modern humans. Nope, they predate us by about 175,000 years. That means Neanderthals were the masterminds behind them. In the 90s, when local cavers stumbled upon these marvels. At that time, they were believed to be 50,000 years old. But recent tests blew that estimate out of the water. However, it wasn't until a journal was published in 2016 that this discovery was made public. And even now, not many know about it. Why did they build them? Were they shelters? Meeting spots? Your guess is as good as ours. But the walls showed signs of fire damage, hinting they might have doubled as cozy little fireplaces. And there are even round holes nearby from where they pulled the stalagmites. One thing's for sure. This made archaeologists realize Neanderthals had some serious skills. Symbolic thinking, basic chemistry know-how, and maybe even a bit of speech ability. So, which one truly grabbed your attention? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more content and hit the notification bell to stay updated. See you next time.